Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the next webinar for the School of Natural Esoterics. My name is Emma, and I am proud to be hosting Matthew Fellows this evening, who is the founder of Glastonbury Acupuncture, is an acupuncturist himself, and of course, is very interested in plants and the esoteric side of acupuncture. So that's what I wanted Matt to come and talk to us about today, because there's a fascinating world and overlap between plants and the energetic, the Chinese 5 elements and the energetics and understanding of that, and how the plants therefore can affect our physical body and our energetic body and our spiritual development and our psyche. So there's lots to unpack today. So it's going to be fun. So Matt, where should we start?
Well, I'll just say hello to everyone. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I was kind of born and bred in Glastonbury. So the two things I was kind of exposed to throughout my life were medicinal plants and alternative healing. So I'm kind of a walking stereotype, really, but not many people understand both that well from that perspective. So the Chinese medicine perspective on sacred plants and hallucinogenic plants, I mean, it's not really talked about or written about, but the Chinese medical framework is so all-encompassing, you can kind of understand pretty much everything through that lens of knowledge. So my big thing is to understand the energetic effects of everything we do, but particularly these plants, because I've always been interested in them since my teenage years. So
plants, you're talking my language with plants. I mean, that's how we've come to be on the webinar together, because, but today we're going to be talking about sacred plants, entheogens, psychedelic plants. And whereas usually I kind of, understand our common native plants and trees, understanding these master plants can help us to understand all plants. So they're kind of like gateway plants as well in many forms.
Yeah.
So, shall we start with some kind of basic energetic understandings, just to kind of lay the foundations, if you want, with, the kind of the understanding of Chinese cosmology.
So the trouble with Chinese medicine is, to understand any of it, you've got to understand all of it. So I'm going to have to go back to the very beginning and kind of explain the very basic structure of Taoism, which is where Chinese medical theory stems from originally. I mean, it can be quite simple, it can be quite complicated. I'll try and make it as simple as possible. I'm sure as different people have different levels of understanding about these sort of things, but we're always with Chinese medicine and Taoism, we have to start with the Yin Yang, which I'm sure you've all seen. The symbol, which I can get up on the screen for you now. Hang on. Is that on there?
Not yet.
No, you'd have to excuse my lack of technical ability. I remember. Hang on, here it comes. Okay, so the Yin Yang symbol is pretty straightforward. I'm sure everyone's seen it. It's probably the most common of all the Chinese symbols. But essentially, to understand it properly, we have to look at the circle to start with. Can you see that little cursor going around it? Yeah. So the circle represents what they call the Wu Ji, which is the unfathomable oneness before creation existed. It's, a bit like God, or a little bit like what happened before the Big Bang. It's just the unexpressed potential, limitless, infinite, completely ununderstandable. So we just call it the Tao or the Wu Ji and just leave it at that.
Well, could we understand it as like the void?
The void, yeah, you could, yeah. The void from which everything springs from.
Yeah, like all that is.
All it is, like that moment before the Big Bang, the primordial soup of oneness. If you can get your head around that bit, everything else is fine. But that unfathomable oneness expresses itself through the yin and yang, which is like the positive and the negative, the masculine, the feminine, the white and black is how they draw it. But it's almost like that movement, which is what they call the Tai Chi, is that movement within the oneness is expressed through the positive and the negative, which almost creates matter around itself through the vibration, positive and negative, which then creates atoms and then creates the physical world around us. It's a pretty hard concept, but some people may have experienced it. But we can look at it simply. So if we look at it, this symbol, we've got the white and the dark. It's a dynamic relationship, which is what this curve means. And each one contains the other one in it. So you can never be fully yang, or you can never be fully yin. It always has the seed of the other one in it. Interestingly, yang literally translates as the sunny side of the hill, and yin translates as the shady side of the hill. But the important thing is that they're still the same hill, but they're just kind of different reflections of it.
And I like the, I know we're looking at something that's static, but like you said, it is dynamic.
It's always changing. As soon as you get to the peak of one, the other one is born. So if we just look at this circle and come around it clockwise, we can see this as anything that's cyclical. So here, if we imagine we're at 12 o'clock, that would be midday. And as soon as midday is, which is maximum yang, that's the largest amount of yang there we can get, yin is born. So we're now at 12:01. And as we move through the afternoon, yin gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it starts to take over. We move into nighttime. We come right back down to the bottom, which would be midnight. And then as soon as we get to the peak of yin, midnight, yang is born again, and it comes back around in this cyclical fashion. And you can look at this through any kind of cycle. So we could do it for the year. So this would be the summer solstice. This would be the autumn equinox, when yin and yang are in perfect balance. Winter solstice, moving back up to the spring equinox, where yin and yang are in perfect balance. We have 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime, background like that. Yeah, anything that goes around in circles, really.
So it's a medicine wheel, basically, isn't it?
It describes reality.
Yeah.
In many ways, really.
And this kind of like that line between the white and the black, where they actually meet, it's like this point of kind of like resistance and kind of like pressure, isn't it?
Yeah. And that is what because the next thing, we move from the 1 to the 2. I don't know if you've ever read the Tao Te Ching. You've probably heard of that poem by Lao Tzu.
Yeah.
And he says from the 1, the 2 is born, and from the 2 comes the 3. So the 3 is the combination of yin and yang. So it's like all the shades of gray between the white and the black of these two things mingling. And that's essentially what we are, is, if you could, so yang is seen as heavenly energy, and yin is seen as earthly energy. So yang is pure heaven, the sky, yin is pure earth. And we exist in between heaven and earth. So the yang chi is kind of coming down and the yin chi is going up. And the combination of those two creates everything else that we are and experience in this reality.
So this yin yang, it's not just out there, it's an internal reality for us as well, isn't it? It's a map of the inner planes as well.
Yeah, because we have these energies play out inside us. We have yin energy and we have yang energy. You could probably experience yin energy. Well, yin chi, we call it. Chi is like the combination of yin and yang. Chi is like energy, I guess we'd call it. Chi is the vibration of matter. It's that combination of the two. And we experience yin chi as a kind of magnetism, like the magnetism of the earth, because it's yin. And we experience yang chi more electrical in nature, like lightning striking, that kind of energy. And inside us, we know these chi, two types of chi, not cheese. I know we're near cheddar, but the two types of chi then mingle with inside us in various forms and create all the energies within the body.
Yeah, amazing.
And this works on all levels: the physical level, energetic level, and consciousness level.
Great, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's Yin Yang covered.
Yeah, basics.
Basic that, yeah.
Let's have a look at the 5 elements then. Can you introduce?
Yeah, okay. So
because it's different, you know, in my tradition, you know, I've got 5, I work with 5 elements in the Celtic tradition, but
yeah.
you know, obviously the Chinese one is slightly different. So,
yeah.
You know, can you just give us a brief outline so that when we kind of apply that to the plants and to kind of what's going on for us internally, we can understand it a bit better?
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to get too bogged down in this. You just need to know Yang rises up, Yin sinks down. If you imagine you're on a trip of some kind, you'd probably start down the bottom of here, and then the Yang energy would build and build and build and build and build until you were more wasted than not. And then you get to the peak of the trip, and as you get to the peak, you start to come back down again. So that, you know, you can easily transfer this pattern quite easily onto anything that you can think of. But then we move from, so we've gone from the 1, which is the circle, we've gone to the 2, which is the yin and yang, we've gone to the 3, which is yin yang and the combination of yin and yang, and then we move via the 4, which is the 4 directions, and then 1 in the middle, to the 5, which is the 5 elements. So I'm just going to change the screen, if you bear with me a second. Hang on. I'll click share again. Okay, got that?
Yes.
Can you see? Yeah. Don't worry about the one on the left with the star in for the moment. We're just looking at the one on the right, which is the creation generation cycle. So we're now moving into a different kind of level of energetic movement within the body, but it's not just within the body, it's within the whole of the planet as well. So I'll just quickly go through these things. So water, start with water. Water is very still and deep and doesn't move. We could see that as like winter if we're doing the seasons. And then from the water springs the wood. So wood energy tends to rise upwards. We're probably just going past the wood energy now, but that's springtime where everything is rising up outside, all the plants and shoots and everything's rising up. That's kind of, they call it wood, but it's essentially an energetic movement, like the yin and yang. One goes up, one goes down. And
is it like, is it because it's wood, because it's kind of like it's structure forming?
No, well, it's more to do with the energetic direction. You know, the wood, when you're a big tree, you're just sucking up that water straight up the trunk. So they use the wood as an analogy to describe an energetic movement, essentially.
Okay.
So we're moving straight up. So the energy of wood is to rise up. And that happens within, we'll come back to this later, because that happens within the body all the time, but certain plants have different energetic effects. So certain plants make the energy rise up because they're more wood in nature. But we'll go on around just to a quick explanation. So once the wood is then in ascendancy, we move into fire. You can quite imagine how wood creates fire. That's pretty straightforward. But fire is to do with summer, and it's the expansion outwards in all directions. Yeah, so we've gone up and then we go out, fully go out, you know, like in summer, everything kind of seems to be expanding outwards in all directions, which we're kind of experiencing now. So that's fire, you know, that exists outside, also exists inside the body as well as an energy. Obviously, it's very hot, it's yang, you know, all these, you can be, it gets complicated, but you can get yin fire and yin wood and yang wood, and depending on what we're talking about. So we come around from fire, next one in the circle is earth. I kind of imagine this is like, so the fire is like a volcano, and as the volcano erupts and it starts to cool down, it turns into earth again. You get like igneous rock, earth. You can imagine how earth comes from fire. This is a funny, it's not quite a season. They call it late summer in Chinese, just to be difficult. They have 5 seasons, but that late summer can actually, in all reality, just be a day. And it's when the fire energy goes fully out and then stops. And you might have those days maybe in September, late September, where everything's completely still and you just feel the energy has stopped expanding out around. And there's that moment where it stops, a bit like breathing out. And you get that moment before the in breath, which is autumn and metal. So we're moving around the circle now from earth to metal. Metal is the autumn element, but it's an energetic of contraction coming back into the body. So each of these elements also pertain to different organs and different meridians. Metal pertains to lungs, and you can imagine that the lungs are drawing chi inwards into the body from outside. So you can see that we dig metal out of the earth. That's quite an easy one to follow and remember. And then as the metal contracts and comes back in, and everything's fully come back into itself again, it's kind of condensed back into water, which is deep, still, doesn't move, kind of unfathomable depths of winter before it comes back around to the cycle again. So everything that happens outside in the universe and the planet also happens inside. So this is the basis of all kind of Chinese medicine, because each of these elements pertains to a different organ, which pertains to a different meridian, and then each meridian has a different elemental point on it. So we can, you can have a fire point on a fire meridian or a wood point on an earth meridian. So you can control the energetic direction of flow of qi within the body by using different points on the meridians. Does that make any sense to you?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, if you can grasp this a little bit, it's fine. We'll keep going back over it, but the main thing is that they create energetic movements of qi within the body. Well, they're describing energetic movements of qi within the body and without of the body.
And we have like organs, bodily organs that kind of are predominantly fire or predominantly earth, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. So the fire, well, the wood organs are the liver and the gallbladder, mainly because they raise, well, so we have organs in the body. We have the physical organs in Chinese medicine, which is the same as what we see the organs as in Western medicine. But then each organ has an energetic function, and it also has an aspect of our consciousness that resides within it, because consciousness resides throughout the whole of the body in Chinese medicine. So when I'm talking about the liver, I'm not just talking about the big brown lump under your ribs. I'm talking about the whole liver energetic function and its aspect of consciousness as well, because there's always these 3 aspects. If we go back to the yin yang, there's always the yin aspect, which is the dense physical. There's always the yang aspect, which is the yang high consciousness, and then there's the qi of the 2 mingling in between. And acupuncture predominantly works on that level in between consciousness and the physical body.
Right, okay. And so like we know that each of our organs kind of holds different emotions as well, so working on the energetic level. And,
absolutely, yeah.
And it's all our organs through which our astral body, if you like, maybe, I don't know if you have that in Chinese medicine, but we
have different terms for it, I think, yeah.
Yeah, the astral body experiences and perceives the world through our through the organs.
Yeah.
Because it's the emotional body, and so it's each of the organs holds a different type of emotion, like the angry, fiery in the liver, and the kind of like the grief and the sadness of the lungs.
Yeah.
So and of course that corresponds to plants as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so we've got the basics down.
Got the basics of Chinese medicine in about 10 minutes.
We're qualified.
Yeah, just give me some needles and let go free. No, it's quite complicated, but also if it gets too complicated, you just go back to yin and yang. It's like, is it yin or is it yang? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it hot? Is it cold? If it's too cold, we warm it up. If it's too hot, cool it down. So we're always trying to find this equilibrium, the balance of yin and yang and the 5 elements.
So when it comes to plants, you know, how do the energetics work? Those kind of energies work within the plants themselves, not necessarily on us, but is it, you know, do that same kind of pattern works through the plants? And so they perhaps, you know, in my tradition and how I understand plants is that each plant, you know, plants are made up of all the elements, that's their soul forces, but each of the plants expresses 1 or 2 of the elements more than others. So
Yeah,
you get more fiery plants than others, you'll get more water. But
absolutely.
each of the plants will express that element in a quite a unique way to itself.
Yeah,
You know,
I
so
guess.
we've got both lady's mantle is a water plant, but so is the yew tree. You know, they're very, very different plants, but they're both very watery.
Yeah,
Do you, the way you understand plants, is it similar in your tradition?
I guess you can't really understand how a plant feels that well and what they experience as consciousness, but you can kind of ingest a plant and then feel how it affects you, which is what you can understand probably more readily. So if, you know, let's take a plant, for example, like cannabis, sure, is a pretty well-known one. So that it's a wood element plant in Chinese medicine. I don't know how it's seen elsewhere, but because of its uprising nature of qi that it creates in the body, it's seen as a wood element, predominantly a wood element plant. So therefore it will be affecting the wood organs in the body, which are the liver, mainly the liver, and well, the gallbladder as well, but it's mainly the liver. And then it will affect the aspects of the consciousness that reside in the liver, and it will affect the emotions of the liver. Yeah, so you kind of.
So that's interesting. So the quality, the main kind of elemental quality of the plant affects the corresponding elemental organs in the body.
Yeah, that's how it would work. Yeah.
Okay, right. Interesting.
So like cannabis, uprising of qi. So you have these 3 treasures within the body. This is another bit of theory, which you might have heard of, called Jing, Qi, and Shen. It's essentially the same 3 again. So we have the yin, yang, and the combination of the 2. So Jing is like seen as our battery, our store of energy, our densest form of energy. Qi is like more rarefied energy. And then our spirit is more rare again in vibrational terms. And when you smoke cannabis or ingest it, its effect is to stimulate the Jing, which is the lower one, into heating up. And that heating up then rises up through the body, stimulates the Qi energy, and then stimulates the Shen. So it's almost like it feeds your spirit. So because it has an uprising effect, which is what we're seeking essentially, or quite often, is to seek connection with higher divinity. And cannabis definitely has that potential to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And because what I find is that it kind of makes the channel to our higher self much easier.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be deceiving, you know. You know, we kind of can get carried away with things on in that regard, but it really does kind of help us to align more to divinity, so that we can have that inspiration. And I think that's why people find that cannabis is very creative.
Yeah, I mean, that is, so when I talk about the spirits of the organs, the spirits that live in the liver are known as the hun. I say live in, it doesn't quite work like that, but you can imagine the little people living in your liver, that little aspect of your consciousness, and they are the visionaries, they're the creative ones, they're the ones who can see into the future and plan. You know, the liver is called the general because it's a planner, because it can see, it has that visionary quality to it, and cannabis definitely stimulates that visionary energy within the body. But you know, you keep doing it, and then it's not going to work so much. It's like you keep heating up that Jing all the time. You keep changing that Jing to Qi to Shen. The warming nature of that will eventually run out of warmth, and it will become cold, and then you won't be able to have any vision anymore. It almost, you've gone too far around the yin and yang. The yang has risen, but it's going to come back down, and you're going to become less visionary than you were before because you used it all up.
So that's why you build up a tolerance to it, don't you? So
you build up a tolerance to it, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a really good kind of teaching, really, from the plants, to get that balance of relationship, because it's easy to, the spirit of cannabis is quite seductive.
Yeah.
Easy to slip into kind of like a habit with her. And so,
especially, I smoked it daily for 20 years, I spent. And then I started doing my practice of Neigong, which is like Qigong, but more in depth. And I literally never smoked it again after that. After the day I started Neigong, I never smoked it again, just because smoking weed is like you're seeking connection with the spirit. And that is the way that you do it, is through smoking that, and you get into the habit, and that is your kind of channel to connect with. But if you can find another way, which feels exactly the same, because Neigong, Qigong is essentially that process of turning Jing to Qi to Shen to kind of feed your spirit or to elevate your spirit. You don't need to do the plant anymore, because you found a way of doing it without having to use the plant anymore.
True, but I found as well that, if you have, I'm like very Virgo, so my kind of, I find that I think in a very structured way.
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like I'm too structured, and I get kind of like hemmed in, and I'm kind of like, I can't quite think my way through to the end of something, thinking through. And so, but with just a little cannabis, it almost like dissolves those structures and allows me to think in a much more lateral way.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly to do with the, like psychedelics increase the neural pathways in the brain.
Yeah.
Is there something else going on there that helps you to dissolve boundaries?
I guess it's stimulating the Hun again, the spirits of the liver, which are the visionaries, and they're the ones that connect with heaven more readily.
Right.
So, yeah, cannabis is a very interesting plant. It's got various properties to it as well, because you've got the THC and you've got the CBD, and that's like the yin and yang of molecules. The THC makes you go up, and the CBD brings you down. So, depending on what you're trying to do, you want cannabis with high THC, or you want cannabis with more CBD, or you want it in balance. But it's always been part of the Chinese materia medica for thousands of years, and they've used it for various things. And it is like a medicine. And if you need it to break down those structures of your mind that we've created, then that's brilliant. But so the CBD is an interesting thing that's become quite popular these days. You can buy it without it being illegal. But the CBD, they say, classically disperses qi. So when you have pain in the body, it's like often that the qi has got stuck in a meridian, and that the pain is the sensation of energy being stuck. So CBD has the potential to disperse stuck qi, which is why it's very good at alleviating pain. But then, if you use it as a medicine, it's great because it disperses the stuck qi. If you can see it in some people who become aimless stoners with no direction in life. It's because they've dispersed all their qi, they've used up all their jing, and they've got no kind of drive anymore.
It's like the energy field gets saturated, isn't it? It's like a build up, and it's quite a heavy energy that it leaves in your energy field when you.
Yeah, because you've dispersed all your qi, and you're like, oh. But sometimes that's what you need to do. If your qi's like this all the time, you want. So there's no judgment in any of this. It's like, do what you need to do, but it's good if you can understand the energetic effects of what it is you're doing.
It reminds me of one of our common native plants, mugwort. You know,
Right.
it's got very, I think actually, if I remember rightly, I think the molecular structure of mugwort is quite similar to cannabinoids. And
Right. Yeah.
so, and mugwort, even though it's known as like, you know, it's kind of known as sailor's tobacco, and it's known as the equivalent of, say, sacred tobacco, it's actually quite similar to cannabis. It's like a really mild form of cannabis, I find.
Yeah. It's like
It's got that, it's got
cannabis leaf almost.
what, sorry?
Like the leaf of the cannabis plant is a bit like
Yeah,
we call it moxa in Chinese medicine.
exactly. Yeah. So
Moxa is
it's like,
massive in that acupuncture.
yeah, exactly.
Mugwort. Yeah.
Chinese mugwort, yeah, used
Yeah.
in that as well. But it's got this, you know, mugwort has like a lot of earth energy, but she's got a lot of air energy as well. Actually, she carries all the elements quite strong.
Yeah.
She's very grounding, you know, because she's very visionary. And so you need to be grounded to have kind of like to hold that center, to be able to be really present to, you know, for dreaming and for visionary and psychic work. So she's got quite a strong air element as well as earth, but then that fire element to kind of
Yeah. I mean, if you look back at that 5-element cycle that we were looking at before, even though I said cannabis predominantly works on the wood, because we've increased our wood energy, we're then going to increase the fire energy because of the generation cycle, and then we're going to increase the earth. So, you know, a classic example of that, which you can experience, is the fire moves into the earth. So the heat moves into the stomach, because the stomach is the element associated with earth, and you get fire in the belly, which is munchies. So, you know, you're starving, you want to eat something because the fire has moved around into the earth, and your stomach's like a cauldron with a hot fire under it, and it's just dying for something to eat. So, you know, these things, even though we say that it's part of the wood, all the elements are always affected, and all the elements pertain to all the plants. It's just some are more prevalent at times than others.
Yeah, okay, yeah, fascinating. That explains the munchies.
And the red eyes as well. That's the heat going up the liver channel into the eyes.
Okay,
Wow.
yeah, the dilated pupils.
Yeah, and the redness you get around the white bits, it's the heat, and the liver channel goes up to the eye, and it's just too much heat.
Right. Okay. So this. Okay. So if you got if you worked with a cannabis medicine that was equal THC and CBD, do they kind of like are they kind of like the effects kind of balanced out a little bit, or is that
Yeah.
optimum?
Yeah, I mean, in California, where they kind of they experiment with all this kind of stuff now because it's all legal, I think you can get various medical grade cannabis percentages, and the one with equal is, you know, it also depends what you're trying to do. If you need more CBD, then you get one with more CBD. But if you can understand the yin and yang of the molecules, and whether you're more yin or you're more yang, then you can tell which one you need more of. But yeah, good medical grade cannabis should be, you know, 15% each of THC, CBD. But then there's all sorts of other stuff involved as well, and other cannabinoids and terpenes and different flavors. And yeah, it's I don't pretend to know all the answers, but it's nice to investigate these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. So let's talk about another of my favorite plants and medicines, psilocybin mushrooms. So
Yeah.
there are lots of magic mushrooms, but particularly, you know, the ones that we know most are from the psilocybe genus. And so we've got a few in our country, haven't we, that we kind of like know quite well, the Liberty caps.
Yeah, I mean, that's our natural hallucinogen
Yeah.
in this country. I guess we've been using it for ever since we've lived here in this country, thousands of years. So it's kind of what we've been brought up to know.
And then you told me about a new one that we've got in the country that's kind of invaded the wavy caps.
The wavy cap, yes, comes in wood chip, shipped over from Canada, cheap wood chip. So Aldi and Lidl import all this cheap wood chip. If you see some strange looking dudes rummaging around Lidl car park in the bushes, it's more than likely that they're looking for the wavy caps. But they do look like a deadly mushroom, so you do need to know what you're doing with those ones. There is a deadly one that looks quite similar.
They're psilocybes cyan sense.
Cyanis. They bruise blue, so they've got that cyan bit in the Latin word.
But they're quite potent, and like the Liberty caps, they have a very similar effect, don't they? They're not quite strong.
Yeah, I mean they once again, like the cannabis plant, they work on the wood element because you're rising the chi up in through the body, but I would say they work more on the fire, which is the shen, which is the spirit, the higher aspect of your spirit. The emotion associated with the fire element is joy and laughter. And anyone who's taken mushrooms will know that, you do laugh quite a lot. That is the experience of the fire energy. Well, yeah, depending on how much you do, hopefully you'll laugh. But yeah, so that's the fire element, and that. So in a scale of yangness, if that's a word, yeah, they're like a step above cannabis. They connect you to spirit kind of more directly, I would say.
Yeah, so they're really opening up the psychic channels, aren't they?
Yeah.
So that we can kind of just see directly into the astral planes. We can see.
Yeah, so that opening up energy is the fire element. It's going out,
Right.
Opening up yourself into the living ether. Then they've also got the earth element in them because they are very earthy and like rummaging around in mud for them.
So they really help us to connect to the spiritual aspect of the earth.
I think so.
So what I find is that they really help to connect to other plants. So if
Yeah.
you work with mushrooms and then say take an essence or take a tincture, or you're out in nature and you connect to it and want to just communicate with a tree or something,
yeah,
it's much easier with with the aid of these psilocybin mushrooms, because you're already in that much more sensitive, receptive space.
Yeah, it breaks down
boundaries.
Definitely.
All your senses are heightened,
Yeah. So there's this other concept in Taoism that we have a kind of what they call the congenital mind, which is the mind that we're born with, the pure, fresh energy that we were born with. And every experience we have throughout life creates layers of what they call the acquired mind, which you create yourself, your sense of self through every experience that you ever have creates another layer of your sense of self. And these mushrooms, these high hallucinogens, strong hallucinogens, they have the ability to break through these layers of the acquired mind to get yourself back to the congenital mind. And if you take enough, you can completely shatter your acquired mind. And when you try and piece it back together again, it doesn't quite fit back like it used to. But
they're really paradigm shifting, really, aren't they? And
it's all about dose, isn't it? Yeah, how much you do.
Yeah, so in our terminology, it's like they help us to break through those conditionings that we've got.
Yeah.
And I always find that the irony of the mushrooms is that they teach us how to be human.
Yeah.
But it really, they really have taught me, these plants, especially the mushrooms, have really taught me how to be a sacred human, what it means to be sacred, because they're introducing you into those inner realms of nature where you're able to open up and recognize your interconnectedness with nature.
I don't think you could cut a tree down if you're on mushrooms.
Yeah.
I don't think you're physically able to do it.
Yeah.
But it's like, mushrooms grow through their mycelium by breaking stuff down. And it's like they do that energetically. They sort of break down the web of the mind that you've created through every, experience of life.
Yeah, they compost, don't they? They decompose things. So they break things down in nature. And then they
do that.
They
to your
compost
brain.
our shadow.
Yeah.
Our brain.
Well, the energetic structures of the mind rather than the brain.
Yeah. Okay. And anything else to add around about the mushrooms or the energetics of the mushrooms before we?
Well, this is kind of, without the mushrooms, I would never have become an acupuncturist. There's no chance I would be where I am now without taking mushrooms. First time I went to university, I went to Wales in Swansea, and they were just growing all around the student village. And every kind of autumn, the whole place would just be going mad on these mushrooms. but and you can't fail. You can be the most thick-headed drunkard at university, but you can't fail to be affected by them in a deep, profound spiritual way. And you can try and fight against it, but if they take you, then they show you things that you probably didn't think were possible before, and you think, right, well, I am now actually communing with this tree, which I've been bred and led to believe is not a possible thing, but this is actually happening on these mushrooms, and they allow you to experience energetic and consciousness phenomenon that you may never have experienced before. They kind of take the blinkers off, and allow you to see fresh again, like you would have seen from childhood. And it is kind of like that childhood energy, that young, fresh, oh my God, the wonder of it all again.
Yeah,
I think everyone
the
should take them.
irony is that people, you're told that, that it's just hallucinations. It's like, but it feels more real than reality.
It does. Yeah, reality seems like a hallucination when you come back to it.
Yeah.
But that's why, when you're young and a kid, we did it far too young because I was growing up around Glastonbury, but you just think, oh yeah, I want to see some stuff that's not there. And you're like, you take it and you see stuff that's actually there that you couldn't see before. So going back to Taoism again, they see the brain not as a generator of thought, but as a filter of thought. And they see us in a wash of, electromagnetic wavelengths and consciousness coming at us from all angles. And they see the brain as like a filter, with a very small bandwidth of information that comes at us, so we can exist in this very small wavelength that we call reality. But these plants, particularly mushrooms, have the ability to expand that bandwidth, so you can see things and hear things, experience things that you may not have experienced before.
Same concept in Buddhism, actually, that the mind is like a crystal. And
right.
Well, two actually, it's like a mirror, so it reflects, which is what we find when we're working with these master plants. In fact, all of nature, it's just that the master plants seem to exhibit and show this in a much more kind of dynamic way, is this reflection of our consciousness back at us. That's the mirror, and that's the astral plane. Actually, the astral plane is a mirror. It reverses everything, so things just get reflected back at us, which is really useful, because that can be really helpful to see what our kind of like our unhelpful patterns are, that kind of thing. But also this idea of the crystal, the mind is like a crystal, and so as the kind of like the beam of a consciousness comes in, perhaps our eternal spirit, our higher mind, it gets refracted out into all these different colors.
Exactly. That's what the 5 elements are.
Yeah.
Essentially, is the refracted nature of pure white spirit. So even whilst we're in this 3-dimensional reality, it's kind of still an illusion created by the refraction of pure white light of spirit. Same idea. I mean, Taoism and Buddhism, they grew up together, and people, they were always arguing about whose idea was what, but they're quite similar.
Yeah. So another beautiful plant that I wanted to talk about, and which I've got one here, this cheeky little chappy here. San Pedrito.
San Pedro.
Yes, I have. I've brought a little peyote button here as well. But let's talk about San Pedro cactus.
I think energetically they work in a similar way to cannabis and mushrooms, but obviously in a very different way again as well.
Yeah, the thing I love about San Pedro is that it's just so beautiful. It just feels so pure. And obviously it comes from the Andes, so it's got that very kind of like crystal clearness to it.
Absolute crystal clarity. Yeah.
The crystal clarity, that's what I love about it. But also the heart medicine, isn't it?
It is the heart. I mean, you're touching your heart when you're talking about it, and that's where it affects me. It is in the heart, and the sensation of love and connection throughout, the universe and inside and outside.
So what's going on with San Pedro energetically then? What's, obviously, so it's a fire plant. Is that its kind of?
Well, the fact that it affects the heart means that it's predominantly a fire, but it also kind of makes you feel more part of the earth as well. So it kind of spreads you out into the nature. Yeah, I mean,
So
interestingly,
sorry, go on.
I'm just going to go back to the other cycle, which is quite interesting, this little bit, if you allow me, just a little side track.
Yeah.
Share screen. Okay, so we've talked about the one on the right, the creation generation cycle. We also have the control cycle. It's not really a destruction cycle, it's more of a control cycle. So we can see that metal, for example, can control wood. So if your wood's out of control, you can get an axe, a metal axe, and chop it down. If your fire's out of control, you can get some water and put the fire out. If your wood is out of control, you get some earth, and if your earth, sorry, the other way around, if your earth is out of control, you get some wood and control it all. So we have this other control cycle, which is also a very interesting thing. And what they're doing in South America now is they have San Pedro treatments for cocaine addicts. And you can see this quite clearly on the control cycle, because cocaine is very metal energy. It's very contracting. It brings everything in and people kind of get used to that. So the fire controls the metal. So that's why the San Pedro is so successful at treating cocaine addiction over in South America.
Yeah, I've experienced that. So if I've been out somewhere, say in London or at a party, and there's lots of people kind of like who have taken that drug, they become very kind of like, they can only speak to themselves. They become very kind of like ego
insular, yeah, and talk about themselves, and they go off into little rooms in themselves. It's a very metallic, energetic drug. But obviously that comes from the plant, which is the coca leaf, which is all about hiking through the high altitudes, because it increases the lungs' ability to contract oxygen into the body. So as a medicine, it's very useful to contract that, getting the chi out of the air, essentially, is what it's doing. But then when you manufacture it into a drug, it creates more contraction, and that's what it does,
Right.
So yeah, the fact that San Pedro has that ability does make it seem very much like a heart fire drug.
Beautiful. So brings you back into, and what the heart does is it reads the room,
Yeah.
the atmosphere. It reads the interconnection between everything. So it takes you back out from this kind of insular perspective out into kind of reconnecting to others.
And the heart's energetic field goes out as wide as your arms do, into a room. I'm sure that, San Pedro would probably increase that. If you could see the size of your heart field when you're on San Pedro, it probably goes well, depending on how much you've taken. I was up in the Andes, up in the high Andes, and I swear mine was like zooming out around the mountain. But yeah, great stuff.
Beautiful. And what I find as well with San Pedro is that it's really protective. It's like the one plant that when I've taken it, I become it. I become the cactus.
Yeah.
I feel.
And you never look at a cactus in the same way again.
Yeah, but it feels like it strengthens the energy field.
Yeah, I mean, when I was only I must have been 20, 21, when me and my mates went to Peru to look for the cactus that we'd heard about, and we went out there and everyone was saying, "Oh, you've got to have a shaman, you've got to have a shaman." And we were young and full of bravado. We were like, "No, we don't need a shaman." And everyone kept saying, "Yes, you need a shaman." Eventually we found a shaman, and he was like, "No, you don't need a shaman. The cactus will be a shaman." And we're like, "Yay!" So he prepared it for us, and then we took it up into the high Andes and ate it ourselves. And it was the shaman. You don't need a shaman, San Pedro. Well, we didn't. I might do now. I'm probably a bit less cocksure of myself these days.
So it really gives you a lot of energy, doesn't it? So it's good for the hiking in the mountains and stuff, or for nature walks, because so what is it about it that it gives you so much energy? It's like really kind of you just have boundless energy with that beautiful plant.
Yeah, I mean, I guess once again it's converting that Jing, that your battery energy, into spirit again. So I guess if you did it all the time, it probably wouldn't. wouldn't
So
be
is
very
it
good
using
for you.
your, sorry, is it using your, keep speaking at the same time, is it using your own energy and converting it, or is it generated, is it pulling it in somehow?
It's a good question. I mean, it's a good question. I don't know.
Right,
I think
yeah.
obviously, as it's a medicine, it's great. But if you did it every day, I'm sure it would deplete you. It
Like
has to come
anything.
from something, like anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of why I went into the Taoist path. I was kind of always wondering whether to go down the shamanic plant route or into Taoism. Eventually, Taoism and Chinese medicine won out for me. But because there are techniques you can use to consolidate and increase your Jing yourself. And then, like I said about that Neigong process, when I never needed to smoke weed again, because I had that connection, I had that conversion of Jing to Qi to Shen, I had that spirit elevation through the practices that the Taoists created.
Right, and so also what I wanted to bring in towards the end here is this concept of moving beyond the 5 elements. So
Yeah.
how can these plants take us beyond this concept of elements? Because that's what, you know, that's quite often what we're trying to kind of achieve, is like, you know, we're trying to kind of transcend or break through out of our dualistic mind.
Yeah.
This and that, I like that, I don't like this, you, me, you know, opposites, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's very tiring actually. You know, when we kind of operate that way. So
Yeah, I don't quite know how they do it, but I know through experience that they do. There was one particular time when I took quite a lot of mushrooms, and your brain just goes through these loops of paradoxical thought. You're going left and right, up and down. It's going round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And eventually, it stops, and you move beyond the yin and the yang, and you go back to the very first thing that we spoke about, which was the void, or the Tao, or the Wu Ji, whatever you want to call it, which is the oneness beyond the opposites. And it takes, sometimes can take a a heroic dose to break through those opposites, because you're breaking through the very reality, the very fabric of reality. You know, if we go, the very first thing I spoke about was how the one becomes the two, and it's the two that create the vibration of matter, it creates reality around everything. So we're trying to get back through that illusion of separation of the yin and yang. You know, that original separation of yin and yang was the Big Bang. So it's no small feat to get back to the oneness, but it is possible through plants.
yeah, so it's like conscious, you know, the consciousness kind of like rarefies, you know, it kind of like allows these plants allow us to kind of like our consciousness to just kind of get to kind of finer and finer vibrations, and to the point where you know, there is no kind of separating into different elements. Everything's
Exactly.
it's just all one, and we're able to experience that.
Yeah.
And which is kind of, yeah, that unity consciousness, if you like, that unconditional love. That's what I kind of find, that I just feel connected to everything through love.
So for me, I had that experience. I went through this yin yang, left, right, up, down, positive, negative, back to the oneness, and I was like, well, that was, and then I stayed in that oneness for quite a while, like the whole rest of the day, and then gradually came back to normal reality-ish. But then I discovered Taoism after that, and they described that experience, that I had. I was like, well, they actually know what I went through. So that's what started me off on this path of Taoism and Chinese medicine, because they had the terminology which I could understand, you know, getting back through this separation of yin and yang back to the oneness, which is kind of exactly how I could describe what happened to me.
And I think all plants can do this, actually. I
Yeah.
find that all plants are psychedelic if you approach them in the right way. That's what my work's based on.
The problem is we're so kind of dumb, aren't we? Generally, we're kind of cut off from spirit and cut off from nature, and we live in houses and we go to school, and we're basically just bombarded with this madness. So we do need a good beat around the head sometimes to get out of that rut that we got ourselves in or brought up in.
Yeah. So for me, it was the first kind of sacred medicine that I encountered, or it encountered me, I don't know, was iboga, which is
right, yeah.
It was the first, and that completely changed my life, because I sat and had a conversation with the spirit of a plant, and it blew my mind. And I was doing my master's in Buddhism at the time, and so it was teaching me in Buddhist concepts so that I could understand. So I said, okay, I'd like an experience of emptiness. So it took me into that void by asking it.
And did you do that in like a controlled setting, or you just went for it on your own and had a go?
It was a controlled setting. It was a ceremonial setting. It was a weekend. It was all, it was beautiful, actually. It was really well held. And so, but yeah, I went into this place of like no mind for about an hour. And
yeah.
It was just vast and beautiful. It was like the luminous void of pure potentiality. And it was, dissolution of self, all of that. I was, a bit of a mess when I got back.
Yeah, I mean, that's the trouble, isn't it? That this is part of the trouble, is that it's the coming back that is the difficult part, and trying to reintegrate yourself into an irrational society where people don't believe in these things. But people like yourself who understand these things and can help people reintegrate. I mean, that's probably the most important thing. Anyone can take a load of mushrooms or sacred plants, but it's kind of being able to come back to normal reality afterwards, and function in some way.
Have you got any advice, like energetically, for doing that, for a safe landing?
Well, we could go back to the yin and yang again. If you've been doing too much yang, you need to do a bit of yin. Or if you've got too much fire, if you smoke too much weed, you need to nourish your jing and the water, because the water is going to be drained from the fire. So acupuncture, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but it's a very good, because it's got such a good understanding of the energetic effects of these things. It wouldn't be such a bad idea to go and get some acupuncture after you've been out on a journey, because you can rebalance the body via the 5-element system of the meridians. I mean, you can do it yourself. There are various ways. Qigong is a great way. There's a set of Qigong called the 5-element movements, and each movement you can see, like fire. You can see what I'm doing. So the fire movement is going out, and the wood energy is coming up, and the metal one's coming in. So you can kind of do these energetic movements yourself through Qigong practice, if you know someone who knows what they're doing. So that's probably, that'd be a really good thing to do, is Qigong, particularly. There are mudras for each of the elements as well, so you can meditate with a certain mudra and feel that energy, the fire energy. So say you've used up loads of your fire energy taking mushrooms all night, it wouldn't be such a bad idea to stimulate your water energy the next day, because it's probably been a bit frazzled.
So if you've used a lot of fire energy or you've been stimulated a lot with the fire from the plants, then kind of like nurture the water.
Yeah, because if you look at that control cycle,
the
one on the left-hand side, you can see which element is used to control. So obviously, if the fire is blazing out of control, then the body's going to be chucking water on it, because the body's continually trying to seek balance. So it's going to be throwing water on the fire to try and cool it down. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're going to be a bit kind of drained in water and a bit excessive in fire. So then you can, you can use points, because each point pertains to a different element on each organ. You know which organs are involved, you know which meridians to use, you know which elements on the organ meridians to use. Or you can do the Qigong, or you can just nourish yourself, with water, essentially.
Right. Okay. Brilliant advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, okay. That was really fascinating, actually, Matt. I have learned a lot. Thank you for.
I just hope to stimulate a few thoughts. I don't have all the answers at all, but I just it's kind of nice to have a different energetic framework to look at these things in, and kind of it does make sense, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really useful, and yeah, it helps us to understand plants better.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I mean, they did understand plants in Taoism because you know, herbal medicine is vast, but and they did have some hallucinogens in their material. They had, you know, datura and cannabis and some mushrooms, so they did know about these things.
Okay. Have you encountered the spirit of datura then?
No, not yet.
Okay,
Nor
well,
a boga. One day.
I might have to bring you a datura essence for a little kind of like
Yeah, like a
introduction.
taster.
You can work with the essence rather than having to take all that toxicity
Yeah.
from the plant. The essence is pretty
But
mind-blowing.
But
So
like you say, once you're sensitive to these things, you can just look at a datura plant and you can feel it's kind of, whoa, that is quite.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've got one in my garden. She's gonna be blooming soon.
Right.
Okay, so let's take a few questions. So Alexander is saying, do all the different types of mushrooms have different spirits like the plant species? I often hear how mushrooms are closer to animals than they are to plants.
Yeah, I think they are genetically closer to animals, and they do all have different. They all have a different spirit to them. Yeah. I mean, I think they probably all work in a similar energetic fashion, but you know, they've all definitely got different flavors to them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, the Liberty Caps are really kind of, for me, they feel very earthy. You know, they
Yeah.
take me into the other world. They take me into like the undergrowth of the earth. You know, I can kind of like, you know, they'll take me into the fairy realm. You know, that it's that kind of energetic frequencies that spirit opens up to. And it's very, as well, the spirit of Liberty Cap, I think, is very druidic actually, and I think it's because it's got, you know, all the plants carry this morphogenic field.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, the druids were a huge part of our land, and so for me, the Liberty Cap are quite druidic. Whereas when you've got the more kind of like, say, golden teachers, you more kind of like you cabensis, they're more celestial, so they kind of like they seem to take me more into the upper astral space.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's a different kind of trip, I suppose, a different experience. And so that spirit, that spirit is well, they're called golden teachers for a reason. I find I actually get taught a lot more from those kind of mushrooms, whereas the Liberty Caps are much more experiential. So I don't exactly meet the spirit, although I can feel the spirit of the Liberty Cap because it's very playful. You know, when you're harvesting and going to look for Liberty Caps in the wild, which I don't recommend anyone doing because it's not legal. But if you were, hypothetically, then you know, there's a whole protocol around it. You know, you should eat the first one you find, and then all the rest are revealed to you, because the children, they play this game.
It's interesting that no one's ever managed to cultivate a Liberty Cap in every mushroom growing country in the world. No one has done it yet.
Why is that?
They're you know, too magical to be tamed, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. No one's done it yet.
Yeah.
You have to go out and get them yourself.
Okay. So Debbie says, what do you think of stammet stack, including lion's mane, niacin, and psilocybin? But isn't stammet stack, isn't that synthetic?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I know Paul Stamets, but I don't know what his stack is.
I've got a feeling it's synthetic. So I don't work with any synthetic things. So I've never tried stammet stack. So I don't know much about it either, but I think it's synthetic. So not for me. Why work with synthetics? I don't get it. It's kind of like, it's extractions. So you're taking kind of like parts of the plant or parts of the mushroom, and you know, therefore you're kind of like, you're not working with the whole of its spirit. You're
not taking spirit on board.
yeah, you're gonna kind of strip out part of the spirit. And it's not like these chemicals work in isolation within the plant, or the alkaloids, or the tryptamines, etc. They don't work in isolation. They work in a combination with all the other chemicals. You know, yes, they will work on their own. They are the psychoactive, say, chemical within a plant, but they work through the support of all the network of other chemicals in the plant. So they're not, you know, you need the whole plant.
Yeah, it's interesting that, because they were doing tests in London now, aren't they, on psilocybin and depression, and they're getting quite good results. And that's just with someone taking one chemical, sitting in a lab with some people taking notes. Imagine what you can achieve with the proper spirit of the mushroom in the environment that the mushroom's grown in, out in the wild somewhere. I mean, it must be infinitely more better for you.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And I think, you know, and I think perhaps these laboratory or clinical tests are just going to be limited. You know, yeah, they probably work, but in a limited kind of way.
Exactly. But it's interesting that they get any results at all. But there you go.
So Wahida says, do you know the effects of hape on the 5 elements? Do you know what hape is?
Is that like a tobacco type thing, is it?
Yeah. So it's usually a tobacco kind of base with different tree barks. Right. Or different dried plants. I mean, it comes from kind of all over the Amazon, which is a massive place. So different tribes have different way of making it, and they have different combinations of plants and trees.
I don't know. I don't know about that one. I know tobacco to me feels like a metal element, and that it makes you go inwards. It's never been my plan. I tried it once, didn't really like it, but I don't know. Yeah, you know, have a do it. See what you think.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, it's very fiery, you know, and I think, you know, because it's really kind of like cleansing, so it literally blasts things out, which I find with a lot, you know, the Amazonian medicines, they kind of quite brutal.
Brutal, yeah.
And so, and very forceful. And so with hape, yeah, it's kind of like, it's just blasting kind of like things out of your energy field, but at the same time, you know, there's different strengths of it as well, so you can get a really gentle, beautiful one that's kind of like opens up your psychic channels.
Yeah, I guess give it a go.
But the thing with hape is that it's a combination, so it really has all of the elements within it, because it's got lots of different plants.
Depends on the blend, and
it's a big blend, so it's difficult to kind of, they're all very different. Okay. Okay, this is for you, Matt. This is from Lindsay. Do you have an elemental understanding of why San Pedro has consistently caused me nausea instead of heart opening?
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty horrible when you eat it. So nausea is interesting, actually. Nausea is the sensation of stomach chi rising. You can quite understand that. It's like the stomach chi. So each organ has a direction it's supposed to go in, and the direction of the stomach chi is to go down. So you eat food, put it in your belly, stomach chi disperses and goes out around the rest of the body. Nausea is the sensation of stomach chi rising, and like we say, San Pedro does have that wood element, and that it's rising up. So maybe it's just rising up too much in the stomach chi. But you know, if you know your acupuncture points, there are points to descend stomach chi, redescend stomach chi. This one here in the middle of the wrist, which people often put bands on when they go like seasickness bands. Yeah. I mean, the theory is that they press on this point in between the 2 tendons there. But it's quite a small point, so unless it's being accurately pushed, then it's not going to work. But it is a very good point at descending stomach chi.
Okay, brilliant, thanks. And I think as well, you know, San Pedro mescaline is the psychoactive chemical in San Pedro, and so some people don't process mescaline very well, and it can kind of, you know, just kind of like stuck in the stomach. so and cause you nausea. So you might be one of those people who doesn't actually break it down very well and digest it. There's a percentage of people who can't process mescaline very well.
Yeah, I had, of the 5 of us who did it in Peru, one of us was sick all night.
Right.
I guess, yeah, that might be
Yeah.
you might be the unlucky percentage.
Yeah.
Or maybe try descending your stomach chi, pericardium 6. If you're taking notes.
I am. Okay, another one for you, Matt.
Yeah.
You talked about your practice of Neigong made you not in need of cannabis. I wonder if you could talk about the balance of practice and substance and how to cultivate. Okay, as well as how to integrate when we sense when energy or presence of the plant world in our practice. That makes sense?
Yeah, generally they say don't take hallucinogens whilst practicing Neigong, which is a bit boring, but that's what they say in Taoism. I just didn't. For me, it wasn't a conscious decision. I didn't think, right, I'm not going to smoke again. I just forgot that's what I did and just didn't do it anymore. If I think if it stimulates you to do more of it, more Neigong by smoking weed, that's a good thing. I think it's a very individual journey, and just do what you feel is best, I guess. What was the other part of the question?
As well as how to integrate when we sense when energy or presence of the plant world in our practice. I don't quite understand it, sorry, but
no, I mean, the Taoists are pretty keen on energetic expansion into plants and stuff. There's a whole practice called Ping Heng Gong, which is doing qigong with trees, and they've got, they always take these things to ridiculous lengths, and they've got lists of which trees affect which organ. Yew trees affect the lungs and the kidneys, and apple trees do this, and you can go up to certain go and do your qigong with a tree and eventually put your awareness into the tree, and you can feel the energetic effects of that tree. And each tree has its own personality anyway, and you might find an oak that doesn't like you and just spit you out again. That's happened before.
I don't know what you were doing. The oaks are usually really very friendly.
Well, no, it didn't like me, that one. Wasn't worthy.
Insulted it in some way.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that helped, Amira. I hope that helped. So and Debbie said, okay, sorry, a couple of people have corrected me because I don't know what stomach stack is, but apparently it's not synthetic. It's mostly used for microdosing, and it's a combination of lion's mane, vitamin B3, and magic mushrooms. Okay.
I mean, I'm really down with the microdosing. It seems to be everyone's doing it around here.
How does that work then in terms of energy?
Yeah, so it's the idea of a microdose is that you don't actually feel the effects of it when you take it, but it just builds up gradually over a long period of time. So I think it's more long lasting. Because you can have a trip and you're in and out and you're back again, and sometimes you can be back where you started from. But with the microdose, because it's almost imperceptible, things change slower. I mean, it's the same with acupuncture. You don't want to change too quickly because then it just flicks back again. You need a gradual effect, a gradual change for a longer lasting effect. So I think that's probably what happens with the microdosing. I think that Stamets guy knows what he's on about. So whatever he's mixing it with, I'm sure he knows what he's doing. Yeah,
I'm sure. Right, that's brought us to the end of our questions. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Matt. It's been a great hour or so, really fascinating. Thank you for...
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to mumble on a bit about these things. But, there are two things that are very close to my heart, Chinese medicine and psychoactive plants. So I wouldn't say I was an expert on either, but I do kind of cross over the two.
Well, I think you're a pretty good acupuncturist. So yes, and it's been fascinating talking about the energies of the plants and the effects they have on us, because everything is energy. So the more we can understand it and navigate that world, the better. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to contact me afterwards.
Where can they find you?
Yeah, Glastonbury Acupuncture. If you Google me, I come up on the top. My website will be on there and my contact details.
Fantastic. All right. And if you're into the esoteric side of acupuncture, which is more to do with acupuncture for spiritual development, that kind of side of things, rather than like physical healing, then yeah, Matt also practices that.
Yeah.
Also,
I mean, that's what acupuncture is really. It was essentially, if you look at the ancient acupuncture text, it was about the spirit and its path through life, and the your contract with heaven, the thing you agreed to embark upon before you were born. It wasn't ever about back pain or tennis elbow. It was about deep kind of spiritual progress, which is kind of more interesting than knee pain.
it is.
But you know, if you've got knee pain, you're not on your path. You can't walk your path properly, so you've got to do it all really.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and thanks to everybody for joining us. And we hope you have enjoyed this webinar. And yeah, we'll be back soon with more webinars in the future. So thank you very much. Thanks again, Matt. And
okay, cheers. Nice to talk to you.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.